This is the Pro Perspective from Houzz Pro, where home builders, designers, and industry experts share their views on running a modern firm.
Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the Pro Perspective. I'm Liza Houseman, and today I'm speaking with Todd Jackson, CEO and President of Jackson Design and Remodeling, about his serial entrepreneurship, what it takes to build multiple thriving businesses, his tried and true hiring strategies, and why buying back your time should be one of your ultimate goals. Welcome, Todd.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to the opportunity today to talk.
Absolutely. So let's just start with a little bit of background on the core business, the remodeling business. Tell us a little bit about, where you're located and how you got started and what you built there.
You got it. So we're in San Diego, California, and so where the sun is plentiful, and we try and let everybody be concerned about the fires and the earthquakes and all that good stuff, so nobody all moves here for the sunshine, right? I started the company back in 1989 when I was approximately 20 years old. And I got a general contractor's license when I was 23. I think I built my first edition when I was 24. And over the period of time, I was probably more of a technician, day to day, right? I used to love to be able to go and put two pieces of wood together, right? There's nothing like being able to assemble and frame up an entire home and wire it up and do the plumbing and all that stuff.
Satisfying, yes.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing more honorable about really good hard work, right? But as time kind of rolled on, I started to build the team where I was no longer able to be that carpenter, right? I was now the project manager, right? And I had carpenters under me, and then down the line we hired project managers, and we kind of rolled into the current status of the business is more design build.
Great. And tell me, how big is the business and how big is your team now?
Currently, we do approximately about 40, 50 projects a year. Average project really starts at about that 500,000 to like that 2 million. Once in a while, we'll do these kind of 250s, you're right, the quicker projects, but not smaller projects. I think the team right now is approximately 60 individuals. We have a core, I think there's about 9 architects, 9 in the architectural department, 15 interior designers, and then
Wow.
the rest are project managers and overall support staff. So we are
Great.
really, yeah.
Yeah, you've built a real large business, and it's
Well,
not the only one. Yes.
no. And it's really more about, we are definitely more of an architectural firm that builds than,
Okay.
we are known as more of the architectural company to come to.
And was that intentional on your part? At what point did you, go from being that project manager to the president and CEO of an architectural firm?
That was many, many years ago when you had heard the term, what that design build looks like. And I think we utilize that design as more as a way to, how do we differentiate ourselves from the other companies? Also, how do we control the entire process? So I had an opportunity years ago to work for Home Depot Expo and do their kitchens and baths. And that's where I first started working with interior designers. And I realized that, hey, this is a strategy that I think would really benefit. And then over the years, though, I do have to say is that I found great people to work with, a passion for design, and the ability to also do, more unique projects. Something that, I didn't want to be 5x8 bathroom king. My goal is to do, really high volume, but still, high custom work.
Got it. And was that because it was more interesting for you to work on? Does the current team kind of feel the same way that, is it more about control, or is it more about, having projects that you get excited to work on?
I think it opens up a lot of opportunities, right? Because we can guide that client through that process from the very start, right? What their dream was, introduce them to what could be, and then actually make that execution throughout the entire process. So I think There's a little bit of that in the control side, right? There's also the ability to get higher margins because you're offering a higher level of service. Typically, you're also working with higher net individual who has the funds to be able to do that. So those are a number of different things. And I do believe that the team has the opportunity to, I think that it gives them an opportunity to learn from each other. Right. So you go into the production department and I've got, six project managers and there's 200 years plus of experience, right? And then you have a designer that, hey, would never have the opportunity to actually figure out how to actually put that together and what the intricacies are. How do we make all that happen? And so I think it's a great opportunity for learning. Also gives my project managers an opportunity to learn patience and understand the creative side, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so we're talking about entrepreneurship, and that's the first business that you built. Tell us about the rest of
You
what you've
got it.
created to date.
And within Jackson, we have a couple of we have some other opportunities that we have created, and one of those is kind of a material side of it. So we do sell, all the tile and all the materials to our clients. So that's a method. So that's kind of a built-in process that we have. The bigger project that we have that I started was another company called Outdoor Elements, which is
Mm.
a high-end outdoor louver patio cover. Then that was approximately a little bit over 7 years ago when we started, just before COVID. And I wanted to try, and at that point in time, Jackson is built and it is pretty well running the day-to-day operations by itself. And sometimes as an entrepreneur, you kind of wander the halls and you're saying to yourself, okay, well, how can I make myself relevant? And what do I like? What would I like to do kind of in that next step? Okay. And I felt kind of like I've done what I want to do here at Jackson, right? And there's other people here that can take it to the next level, and some of that is for me just to kind of step out of the way. So Outdoor Elements, though, we started that, and many years ago I've had opportunities to install a few other brands of the same product
Mm.
line. And one of the things that I had realized is when I was buying from a manufacturer, okay, and then they were delivering me a pile of material that I was actually cutting up in the field. And then I realized actually they're not the manufacturer, I'm the manufacturer in the field, right? So it was obviously a product that had been designed by somebody who had never been in the field and
Right.
didn't quite understand what they needed. And whether it had been lighting, it had been, accessories and all those other items, they show them in a portfolio, but then they don't supply them. And I realized, okay, there's a great opportunity. So over the last 7 years, we've built that. And that's where I probably have put most of my time and energy over the last several years and developed that. So currently we're in about 45 states, about 225 dealers across the nation. And so this one is something I wanted to build a little bit more on the national level versus in my own local hometown.
And I guess where do you think that entrepreneurial drive came from, and what does being an entrepreneur mean to you? How do you define it?
It's so funny. I don't necessarily know that ever was, hey, you're going to be an entrepreneur when you know what I mean? I think
Right.
there's just a work ethic when you're a little kid. Remember being out and, just I grew up in Colorado, and if you wanted, and we didn't have a whole lot of money, so guess what? You either mowed the grass, you raked the leaves, and you shovel the snow, and that's what you did, And when I was a kid, I had paper routes. I don't necessarily know that was me being an entrepreneur. That was just me being, hey, I wanted some spending cash, right? That sort of thing. I as I go back and look at the overall career, what does an entrepreneur mean to me? And I think I believe if somebody's ultimate goal is, hey, only to make more money, I would never become an entrepreneur. There's so many other, deep reasons to be able to do that. And for me, some of that is, hey, being able to create my own opportunity and, me being able to see a vision and figure out how I can make that vision grow. I love the chess part of being an entrepreneur. If I do this, how does that react over here? If I can move this way, and so I love that portion of being an entrepreneur. I love the ability to be able to learn, and then I love to be able to also be able to have the opportunity to teach and
Nice.
see people to grow. I mean, I've been blessed. I have at Jackson, we just celebrated, the 20th year with one of my employees. Okay. And that just, brings something into your heart. You're just like, somebody gave me their career, right? I
You
mean,
did something
part of
right.
their
Yeah.
lifetime, that's pretty amazing. But having the opportunity, we love to be, I think we do lunch and learns 26 times a week. So we bring in the designers and we bring in production and the architecture and we bring in whether it's a vendor or supplier, whoever that is, to be able to, create the opportunity for those people to learn, become smarter, be better in their trade. So,
That's a great idea. I mean,
yeah.
implementing something like that on a consistent basis makes a lot of sense as you're looking to, develop that team and reinvest. What motivates you? What gets you up in the morning every day?
I love what I do, and I love the opportunity to be able to come in and, I think there's 65% of your business, right, is, hey, there's certain things that you just got to do every day, right? And then it's the other percentage that, hey, we're going to have a meeting about the financials and we'll work on that and next year's budget, but now we're also getting an opportunity to look at, hey, new product lines that we're going to launch, right? And at Jackson, it's about, hey, look at this new core project that we're going to be able to do with these folks and some different challenges there. So I think it's just about, for me, that's how I get emotionally charged, is having the opportunity to be able to, kind of maneuver and use my brain, that sort of thing.
Makes sense. One thing you mentioned, I think, when we talked the other day was that owners have shiny ball syndrome, that often, right, there are lots of exciting new things, and you talked about their new product lines coming out and you see opportunities. What are the challenges associated with that? How do you keep from, going and chasing the next shiny ball that comes along?
Limit how many you're having, right? Which is very, very difficult, right? There's
Yes.
always time to think up new stuff. I think what ends up happening, right? Everybody has great ideas, right? And then it's all about the implementation. And if you don't work through that kind of process to kind of lay that out,
Yeah.
I think what also happens is you have an entrepreneur, and now this is my baby, and I have to hold it, I have to cuddle it, I've got to grow it, right? Versus, hey, how about an idea, get other people's input, and then have other people help grow that piece, right? And hold people accountable. So hey, we're going to start a new process at Jackson, right? They're moving into new software this year, and we have one person who's managing the spearheading and the training of that, but hey, each department head has measurable actions that they have to make sure that their people are moving forward and tracking, right? And so it doesn't have to be only one person's opportunity. I have been, as I get older, right, a little bit more mature, right? You realize, okay, maybe I need fewer of those, right? And let's get them, make sure that they get completed. And I think that's what happens, right? The syndrome is not about starting them. The syndrome is not completing them and implementing
Mhm.
them, right? And then what happens is it just creates a lot of chaos, I think, with your team, your team members. So
It
little,
makes sense. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think most people listening to this who maybe are in the stage you were in earlier on with Jackson, of kind of still building that remodeling business or construction business, they're probably listening saying, "Oh my goodness, Todd, how do you make time to do these new things? And I love this idea, and maybe I've got other ideas, but it takes a lot of my time just to, manage the business that I'm in right now." What advice do you have for folks on, creating some space, whether that's to start something new or to work on the business that they're in a different way? How do you handle that time management?
there's a lot of different things that finances can help with, right? When you're making money, right, that's helpful. And I think when I look at that, you have to have a business plan that allows you to be able to do some of that, right? Because you need time. And really how you got to get time back is you're gonna buy it back, right? And so you can't do it when you're a carpenter because you're in the field, right? You're putting those things together, right? Or if you're managing all your projects and putting all that stuff together. One of the things that I would say, after about 10, 12 years into my career, one of the things that I had really looked at and started to learn was, hey, you have to pay yourself for the things that you do. So I'll give you an idea. I'm the general manager of Jackson Design. Okay, I get a salary. No problem. I'm running the day-to-day operations. I'm moving and I'm grooving all over the place, right? But I also do sales. Okay. I also get paid a sales commission. Okay. And then at the end of the year, the expectations is that I'm an investor and my expectation is trying to get 9 to 10% gross profit. When I started the transition from one company to another, guess what? I had money there for a salesperson. I had money there for a general manager. And at the end of the day, I'm the investor. Now that has been invested time and I've invested money in this, and now the reward is still here, right? And I think sometimes what happens is people don't set themselves up financially to be able to pay themselves. Got a wonderful buddy of mine, large company, right? 25, 26 million, but very custom, unique, right? He does all the sales, but there's no sales commission. Well, when you leave, guess what happens? Where's people are going to sell for free. It's not a very,
Right.
So I would say, and then make sure that you're working on the highest, most, how can I bring the most value to my company? And sometimes, we end up doing some of the mundane stuff and you're like, why am I doing this? This makes no sense for me to be able to focusing my time on whatever that looks like, So I think that's, if you're doing it and be deliberate, right? A little bit of time management will probably go a long way versus just coming into work and allowing things to happen to you. Come into work,
Right.
write everything you want to do. Mark Richardson actually came in and taught our entire company a little bit of his time management kind of technique on how to kind of lay everything out, put some time from it, and just try and get done as much as you can, right? So you are actually in control of your time versus, the day just hijacking your day.
Makes a lot of sense. How about the team? So, I think that's great advice on, setting yourself up financially. And you said, you have to buy your time back. I think, right, as you said, a lot of that is hiring. So, how did you think about what had to be in place from a hiring perspective for you to be able to focus on something else?
Well, some different things that we used to do. It was funny is that I would interview somebody and I'd bring them on and they're the best in the universe. And it turns out I bring them in and the rest of the team hate them. And, 2 months later, they're down the road. You know what I mean? So we soon got to the point where it's funny is that it goes from now HR, right, tracks them down and does the initial meeting. Then it goes to the department head. And really, that's where the technical skill comes in. They're being interviewed for the technical skill. Then they come in and they actually interviewed by the entire leadership team. So, you have 7 people that do an overall interview and ask questions. I think people come in there, they come in with a big portfolio and they're all ready to show their drawings and they're all that. And then what they don't realize is that that's a culture meeting. And really all we're doing there is talking about, hey, how do you handle stress? How do you work best? Right? What does success look like to you? Right? And it's a very different interview. And we've had interviews where that have gone just spectacular. And we've had interviews where, people cry. We were trying to set up a therapy session, but that's what it turns out to be, right? Exactly. Nobody asked me what I want, but then the team determines if that person is a right fit for the entire company, right? And I think that's how we hire. And it's also hiring smart people, not being afraid to hire people that are experts in their field that probably have more knowledge than you. If you think about it, I'm not an architect. Okay. I went to a little bit of college. I put a little bit of college in, right? But I theoretically got out of high school, right? Worked for some folks that wanted to an apprentice, and then I
Mm.
started my own company. But I have now, a design staff of 25 and, licensed architects and, wonderful people. And I think don't be afraid to bring those good people in because you've got to surround yourself with phenomenal people. And I think sometimes as owners, we have to feel like we're in charge, right? I know everything about everything, and you just know a piece of it. I don't think you know, that's to grow your business. That's not probably helpful.
The interview process is interesting. It obviously makes sense that if you have the team interview them, you're more likely to find someone who's going to be a fit. I imagine that also has a positive impact on onboarding, that the people who interviewed are more, I guess, bought into making that person successful and helping them, become part of the company because they help make that decision. Have you found that that's the case?
100%. I mean, it's because now everybody has responsibility in it. Right. It's not one
Exactly.
person. I haven't cast this person upon you,
Exactly.
And once in a while you find out, you had a group of people who all hired this person and you're like, yeah, this isn't working out. And you're just like, what, how did that person get through? And so, but I do have to say is that I feel like it's worked really well for us. It's a little bit better. The end results are I don't think that people realize how much time and energy and money it really costs you to onboard somebody. So before you bring somebody
Right.
on, the goal is to keep people for long term.
Yes, I think, right. It's cheaper to keep a customer than to get a new one, and I think it's the
Right.
exact same story with employees and team members. It's right a lot more cost effective not to lose people and to get the right people in the
Right.
first place and develop them and keep them happy.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's an interesting segue, the kind of hiring and developing the team. You said you pretty much came out of high school and went into this business, but built a huge professional thriving company, and not just one, but two. You're obviously a great model for what this industry can look
Thank you.
like and what somebody capable can do. And yet, the overall reputation is still not that someone that goes into this industry is that caliber, that the businesses are at that caliber. And we're seeing that reflected in the challenges attracting new people, new labor, young people to the industry, right? They don't see it
Right.
as something that's lucrative or well respected. What do you think we need to do? And I'm hearing this when for companies large and small, that this is such a challenge. And I'm curious your perspective and what you think we need to do just in general as an industry to change that
Well,
perspective.
first of all, we have to change the parents' mindsets, right? My little darlings,
Hmm.
right? And when I say that is this, I'm the first person who says, my daughter's going to college. Just, right now she's the controller at one of my businesses, so I just learned that out there, right? But I think sometimes hey, my child has to go to college, or I don't necessarily know that what the skill set is. I think it's sitting people down. It's hard because you have young people and they don't know what they want to do, right? And what one thing kind of leads to another, and 5 years later they're living in their parents' basement, right? And at fast food, and I'm not quite sure how that ever happened. I think too, when I look at that, is you say, hey, let's take a look at the career of a plumber. And what does that plumber start off as? And in 5 years, what does that look like? And in 10 years, hey, what's that income of a plumber?
Right, the earning potential. Yes.
Yeah. And we look at that as, how many plumbers, what's the work, are they ever unemployed? Right? Is that electrician ever unemployed? Right. And then you look at, hey, we're going to send my son or daughter to college, and they really don't know what they want to do. They're just kind of bouncing around, show them a little career path. I think that's what it's kind of, just like you would. I can remember my daughter saying, "Hey, maybe I'll just get my liberal arts, degree." And I'm like, "No, how about we look at a business degree?" Right? If you think you may want to teach someday, that's great. No problem at all. And if you have a business degree, guess what? You can teach, right? But if there's some skill set, but we compared those opportunities. And I think by the time you invest in college and you invest in other opportunities and you put that 4 years in and some of the challenges are, can you get out and actually have a job? So I'm not down on college. I think that I'm not down on education. I just think that there needs to be an opportunity. People need to understand that there's a lot of different ways to learn. With that being said, I think that's probably one of the greatest issues that we have today in this country. And it's about workforce, and it's about whether it's manufacturing. And I'm on both sectors, right? I'm on the manufacturing side and I'm on the construction side. And I think it's about, having different opportunities to train. When I was in high school, right, I was at B, B, I would get B's all the time, right? I could get A's. I get A pluses, but that's a lot of work, right? Let's just, a true entrepreneur.
Yeah, you had other things to do.
Yeah, exactly. But one of the things that the school had an opportunity was vocational construction,
Mm,
right?
right.
And so instead of me learning, certain curriculum, I could go and literally you have 4 periods that you could learn the construction trade. So,
Wow.
it's a shame that, a lot of school districts have shut that program down.
Yeah, that program and most of the sort of physical, hands-on programs like that, I think, have disappeared.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting because I feel like, yes, that practical path, right? They're not exposed to those other practical paths early on. But I think also it's not paired with showcasing a business like yours or a career path like yours, right? They don't really see it's okay, great, I can do this construction, but they don't really understand that there's a business and that you could be a business person, right? And
Right.
yes, you can learn this trade and that's fine if you stay in this trade, but also it could mean that you're owning or running your own business and that is right. And in your case, like it can be a reasonably,
Yeah.
glamorous in some ways business that they're running. And I think there's just not a lot of visibility that, you know, that there are these big professional construction
Oh,
companies,
yeah.
right, out there.
Yeah. And even if it's a boutique, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be a team of 60, it could be a team of 4, right?
Right.
But
But
you could
just
be,
that level of professionalism is
yeah,
what I'm talking about, right? It's something that should be well respected and that the general community sees as a
yeah.
right.
I do have to say is that since really the design build side has come about, the level of professionalism has
Mhm.
increased. Um, and part of that, I think, is, we charge for estimates. What do you mean you charge for an estimate? Nobody charges for estimates,
Right.
right? That word estimate equals free in a lot of mindsets, right? And hey, I'll come out and talk to you for an hour or so, right? But at that point, after that, hey, we're going to charge for our ideas because it's a level of this is knowledge, right? And we have the ability to help you, and guide you through this process. So, and I think I don't necessarily know that people really know at some point in their younger career understand that no, there's people out there that will pay you for that knowledge that you have. So,
Makes sense. Yeah.
mm,
No, it's an interesting times. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about what's next for you. Um, I think one of the things that we talked about earlier was that it is hard to start something new, and starting the second business was harder than starting the first. Maybe talk a little bit about why that was the case.
I think for me, I had settled in, I had great people, I had experienced people, right? There's something about being able to look across the room and, the person on the other side, they know exactly what you're thinking. Time heals all wounds. And so you don't remember, hey, how, what that took to get from point A to point B. And it was probably a good lesson for me to start another business where you're now having to bring in new people and you're having to develop all the processes. And you're like, I don't understand. This was so easy at the other company, right? Because, hey, that's because, the young lady in the office just takes care of all of that, right?
Right.
So for me, this is probably the last big business I'm gonna kind of move to, right? I
Okay.
don't, I think Jackson, I think is phenomenal, right? And I'm wanting to give that opportunity to some of the employees there to continue that, and hopefully that'll be the ability. My other company, Outdoor Elements, Jackson, I built for the love of it, right? And my new company, I built to sell. So,
Okay.
right. So I love it, but we're building it, we're building to scale. And so some of the challenges are this, is that when I started Jackson, I didn't know what I didn't know. Okay. But I still had to pay for it. So all those mistakes along the lines, I still had to write a check for, right? I think though now hey, you've got 30 years of business underneath your belt, and now you've got to build this, and now you've got to scale. So what do you got to know? And now you have all this knowledge, and now it's how do I implement, right? 30 years of knowledge. So I know I have to build out a CRM. Now I know I have these processes. I know I have to create a new product line. And how do you do that as quickly as you possibly can?
Hmm.
Right. And that's the kind of the scale and the pressure that you probably have, because it's sort of like the last recession. I was talking to my wife, and she could probably see a little bit of stress on my face, and she goes, "Hey, don't worry about it. You've done this before, and you've got this." I said, "Absolutely, but the difference is I know how to read a P&L and a balance sheet, and I can forecast the future, right? Okay, so now I have this
Right.
knowledge. Now I'm gonna, so now it just over 30 years, right? There's big growth spurts and that kind of thing that happen, but you had time to develop. In this business, there's no time. We just got to move as fast as we can. And so I think that's been some of the challenge. We talked a little bit about the labor, right? How do you surround yourself with skilled labor? I have been a benefactor of Jackson, that you walk in and I have 17,000 square feet. The offices are beautiful. You go into the bathrooms, they're heated toilets. Okay. Who doesn't want to work there? Right? You see what I'm saying? You know what I mean? It's not, would you?
Because in San Diego, you need a heated toilet.
Yeah,
And I'm
that's
joking
it.
because I have one. I'm in California and I have one too. It's such a
Yeah,
nice thing, but
exactly.
yes.
But now you have this shoestring business that you're trying to get started, right? And you're trying to have people come in. The offices are okay, but they're not what you used to have, right? So you're trying to hire the best, but in a manufacturing conditions. And anyway, those are some other challenges as you grow, right?
Interesting. Yes.
So
Well, you just point to Jackson and say, like, hey, if we do well, this is
yeah, this
this is
is
the opportunity,
yeah.
right? This is
We
the
did. I
end of the
the
rainbow.
the silly thing was just we just bought a building, 26,000 square feet, and moved the facility inside. Okay. And one of the first things I did is we built out these, not only the office spaces, but the bathrooms are really nice.
Bathrooms.
Exactly. Because I was like, I've got, to go from a glorious bathroom, right, in the remodel side, and to literally we used, a bathroom that looked like it was out of some kind of gas station for a period of time. So I try not to, the first
Yes.
ones, for sure.
It's probably just hard as a remodeler, someone in the industry to just live with that bathroom with
Yeah.
and attract women to work there probably
Yeah.
too.
Exactly. Exactly. With
Um,
that, I do want to say,
yeah.
getting back to the entrepreneur, I'm just going to cut this back in real quick. Is at Jackson, I would say that 50% of my staff are women.
Well,
So and just, surround yourself with, it doesn't matter whether male or female, but just surround yourself with skilled, high-end people that can bring something to the table. So that's, I would say, one of our best, successes.
Got it. Well, you're still young. You clearly have a lot of energy. You said this is the last major business. So, if you're to sell, what's next for you? And is there anything else in the works?
I have nothing in the works. I had an opportunity to take 3 weeks in Europe this year, and so we'll be hopefully traveling. I'm 57. I'll probably work till I'm 60-ish, right? 60. Ultimately, I would probably like to, and I'll still do something, whether that be commercial development, maybe I'll flip a house once or twice, but I don't want to do it where I have a large staff, right?
Hmm.
You know, the complexity. I just want something a little bit more simple that I can keep my mind around.
Right.
And then there's opportunities to be able to, if there's lessons that I have learned that I can help pass on, that's always not, and help somebody else grow. That's always, fantastic also. So,
I
but
love
no,
it. Yeah.
no desire to start something big. Uh,
Right.
I've,
No, it's more complex, right? When you have people to manage and you're responsible for them, right? Finding something. And I think a lot of people try to figure out what that is, right? In sort of semi-retirement because they're not ready to stop thinking about things, right? You're
yeah,
worried that you get bored. But at the same time, you want the flexibility to take your 3 weeks and travel or, right, spend time where you want. And not everybody has the luxury of finding that kind of next phase that fits that. So
yeah.
it's
And
terrific that
Jackson,
you've put a
just to
plan.
give everybody an idea, is that I used to put in a lot of hours at Jackson, okay, as an entrepreneur. So if you're putting in a lot of hours, just make sure that it's purposeful, right? There's a reason for it. I just don't do it just because, oh, I always just come in and do my paperwork on Sunday. You know what I mean? Figure out how
Mhm.
you can, it just kind of happens that you work all these extra hours, right? Just make sure that, hey, you're doing it for a reason and is it for a period of time versus, you know, everybody else leaving at 40 hours or whatever that looks like, right? And you're there, you're still there. And I think it just needs to be a little bit more purposeful when they make that happen. So, but I now put in approximately 3 hours, 2, 3 hours at Jackson a month.
A month. Okay.
And then
And and what did that transition look like? So you said you used to work a lot of hours. Until what point and how many hours was that? And then was it just building that financial plan? How did you get yourself off of that?
I think this depends upon what position you're in the company, right? So owner sales is a very difficult position. And the reason for that is sales sometimes, like for me, I wouldn't do an appointment after 3:34, right? I don't want to, I'm not going there in the evening, right? But I didn't mind doing, a half a day on Saturday. Give me an 8, give me a 10, and you know what I mean? And that's fine. I don't mind meeting folks on a Saturday. So for me, I think when I was working at Jackson, it was probably that, 5.5 hours or something like that. Surely, I'm sure those were 10-hour days, but I get up early, right? And so I would typically be at the office by, 6:37 for sure.
It
And
sounds like you set up boundaries that worked for you though, right? With those
yeah,
some of those choices.
yeah, taking the sales position off is, as an owner, is probably, that's the hardest hat to fill. But it's probably will be the most, if you get the
Mm.
right people in there, right? That's a key position that just drowns time, right? That one position takes a lot of time. So if you can find good people to take that over, that's probably helpful. That was probably the biggest transition, right?
It seems, yeah, the kind of the most common situation that I've heard, right, where it is the owner or salesperson, and as soon as they can find, and hire to take that off the plate, it allows them to focus on other areas and
Yeah,
control their time a bit more.
yeah.
Any other last bits of advice for folks either, again, trying to make that time within their own business or thinking about, that opportunity that they see the way that you saw one?
Find a mentor. I did not find either a group. For me, it was a group that I found to join that really helped me, right? One of the big remodeling, reference groups. and I learned a lot from not only that group, but my peers around me. But I went years and years trying to figure out how to do this really myself, right? I read
Mm.
books, right, and a little bit of that, but there are, many people out there that have a lot of experience that would love to be able to share some of those experiences. And, you don't always have to learn by spending money, right? And I think sometimes it's just the ability to ask, right? And we have a tendency not to ask, oh, I can do this myself,
Right.
especially as an entrepreneur. I'm going to do this myself. I can make through this versus coming up for air and saying, hey, this guy has 30 years of this, and all it has to do is this one little varying, and things change, that quickly. So,
Great advice. Great advice. Yeah, it always helps to have someone to talk to, and being the CEO can be a lonely job. So, right? It really can when you're the ultimate decision maker. So,
well,
um, wonderful, wonderful advice. Well, Todd, thank you so much for joining us today, and wishing you all the best with all of the ventures that you have, and with moving towards that kind of next phase. I really appreciate the advice that you shared with everyone, and excited to share this with our broader community.
wonderful. Thank you very much. And I wish everybody well out there. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This series is brought to you by Houzz Pro. To learn more about our best-in-class software for winning clients, managing projects, and simplifying your workflow, visit houzz.com/pro.